Diego and I spent half our lives as a resentful couple. On our deathbeds, we looked at each other and, with the most venomous words, wished never to meet again in the next life. He hated me for tying him down with marriage and children, robbing him of the chance to become a singer in Beijing. I hated him for indulging in feasts outside every day while leaving his gravely ill parents and our 2 children to me. Yet, in the depths of our resentment, we were reborn. We locked eyes in the crowd for a brief moment, then, without hesitation, turned and walked away in opposite directions. This time, I hope neither of us will have regrets. Chapter 1. The day I changed my college application, my father walked into the study, glanced at me, and nodded approvingly. Good, with your high scores. You should be going to a top university. Stop running after that kid Diego all the time. What's so great about him? My mother, overhearing from the kitchen, quickly ran in, pulled my father away, and shot him a glare. I smiled as I watched them leave. But suddenly, a wave of sorrow surged in my chest. In my past life, I had rushed out of the house late at night to find Diego at the train station. My parents went looking for me, only to be hit by a drunk truck driver. They died that night. In the end, I never got to see them one last time. Holding back my tears, I moved my mouse and, without hesitation, clicked the confirmation button to change my college application. Chapter 2. In my past life, Diego, my childhood sweetheart, suddenly announced that he wanted to be a singer. He was going to Beijing to chase his dreams. But before that, he had always said that being with me and going to the same university together was his dream. Because of that, I wasted my 600+ exam score to apply to the same second-tier university as him. Yet, just 2 days before our acceptance letters arrived, he abruptly decided to leave for Beijing. In the middle of the night, his sickly parents came knocking on my family's door, begging me to help find their son. In my past life, I went. My parents, worried about me, chased after me, only to get into a car accident. Diego eventually came back when his parents blamed him for my parents' deaths, saying he had to compensate me. They forced him to get engaged to me. The plan was to get married right after college. But then, in my sophomore year, I got pregnant. I had to take a leave from school. One thing led to another: an urgent marriage certificate, pregnancy, childbirth, raising a child. 2 years passed in a blur. Just as I was looking forward to returning to school, my in-laws, now gravely ill, moved in with us for treatment. Diego told me to be more understanding, that his parents had already sacrificed so much to put him through school, and now that they were sick, they needed to be cared for. As for him, of course, he had to go to work and earn money to support the family. At the time, I bit my tongue for Diego's sake and didn't mention that his measly 3,500 yuan a month salary wasn't even enough to cover the baby's formula, let alone our household expenses. In the end, I had to sell my family's old home to pay for my in-laws' medical bills while raising our 2 children. And while I was sacrificing my education and struggling to hold everything together, Diego was out socializing with his group of drinking buddies, using what little money he had left to record songs, insisting on pursuing his dream. I was drowning under the weight of the family burden when repeated discussions led nowhere. Our arguments grew heated. He began calling me bitter and narrow-minded, blaming me for dragging him back from Beijing, saying that if it weren't for me, he would have been a superstar by now. He even accused me of using my parents' death to emotionally blackmail him into marriage. I didn't hold back either. I told him he was delusional, that with his broken, off-key voice, dreaming of becoming a singer was pure fantasy. When he brought up my parents' deaths, I snapped. I lunged at him, wanting to shut him up, only for him to shove me away violently. From then on, Diego started staying out on purpose. His parents, unable to see their son, took out their frustrations on me. They scolded me for being insensitive, too petty, and always making their son angry. They conveniently forgot how they had once begged me to find him. Trapped in this miserable life, I gritted my teeth and took on small jobs, barely scraping enough to keep the family afloat. Yet, the children I worked so hard to raise never grew close to me. Instead, they adored Diego, the father who never did a thing. I thought that once the children grew up, they would eventually understand. I waited for over 20 years until they got married and had families of their own. But when the time came, they couldn't wait to take Diego into their homes, eager to care for him. As for me, they treated me with indifference. Mom, you were too controlling when we were kids. We don't want to hear any more of your lectures. Dad's dreams were crushed by you when he was young. Now that he's older, we're taking him to Beijing to chase his dreams again. Grandpa and Grandma were right. You just want to control everyone's lives. You're selfish. I never expected my own children to say these things to me. Heartbroken, I staggered home only to find Diego grinning triumphantly as he packed his luggage, showing off how he was finally leaving me behind for a better life. I had sacrificed over 20 years managing this household, and in the end, all I got was the label of a selfish, controlling woman. Why was Diego the one who got to live so freely? He abandoned his family, ignored his responsibilities, yet in the end, he became the open-minded, loving father in the children's eyes? I snapped. I lunged forward and shoved Diego with all my strength. He froze for a second before grabbing a vase and hurling it at me. You dare lay a hand on me, you bitch? I'll beat you to death. So, in the end, our deaths were nothing more than the consequences of our mutual destruction. As we both lay on the ground, dying, my last thought was a desperate prayer. If there is a next life, please, never let me meet Diego again. Chapter 3. The day I was reborn happened to be the same day I changed my college application. Looking at my parents, who were still alive and standing beside me, I swore I would never get involved with Diego again. After the college entrance exams, the celebrations began one after another. Just as I was leaving a gathering with my close friends, I spotted Diego not far away, laughing and chatting with his buddies. I heard Diego isn't going to college, he's heading to Beijing to become a singer. Wow. Is he joining the whole Beijing drifter trend? If he becomes a big star, should we ask for a few signed photos now while we still can? Miranda, you and Diego grew up together, right? You must know about this. A friend nudged me, and just as I turned my gaze over the crowd, Diego also happened to look in my direction. At that moment, I knew Diego had been reborn too. I don't know anything about it. I have something to do, I'll head home first. Without hesitation, I turned and left, since he wanted to go to Beijing so badly. Then let him go. His life had nothing to do with me anymore. Chapter 4. As the day of Diego's departure grew closer, I acted like a spoiled child in front of my parents, saying I missed my grandmother and wanted them to take me to her house to see the newly hatched ducklings. My parents had always doted on me. Without a second thought, they packed up our bags and took me out of town. Just as we stepped out, Diego's mother, Sandra, opened her door as well. She paused when she saw us. Heading out, my father grinned. Miranda wants to visit her grandmother, so we'll be gone for a few days. Sandra smiled and nodded. Watching us leave, I acted indifferent. But in reality, my fists were clenched so tightly with rage that my nails dug into my palms. How laughable. In my past life, I had foolishly believed Sandra truly cared about me. It wasn't until much later that I realized her intentions had never been pure from the very start. She had long coveted my family's house, which was why, after my parents' deaths, she worked so hard to push me into marrying Diego. Back then, with no parents and drowning in grief, I cried myself to sleep every night. Sandra, with her gentle demeanor and seemingly endless patience, comforted me, took care of me, and slowly broke down my defenses. And since I already had feelings for Diego, I fell into their carefully laid trap without a second thought. I never imagined that from the very beginning, they had come prepared. I took a deep breath, suppressing the slight tremor of anger that threatened to surface. Smiling, I chatted with my parents about the new pony my grandmother had bought, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Diego's hurried footsteps. He must have realized that I had been reborn as well. So, in a panic, he pushed forward his escape plan to chase his dream in Beijing. We had barely arrived at my grandmother's house, happily enjoying dinner, when my mom's phone rang. It was Sandra. Diego insists on going to Beijing to become a singer. He refuses to go to college. Now he's making a scene, saying he'll die if he doesn't go. His father and I have tried everything, but he won't listen. Miranda, could you come back and talk to him? The two of you have always been close. And Diego listens to you, the exact same lines as in my previous life. My mother looked at me hesitantly. After all, we were deep in the countryside, and going back wouldn't be easy. Calmly, I put down my chopsticks and took the phone from her hands. Aunt Sandra, this is Diego's decision. I can't interfere. Even if I do, he'll just blame me for it later. I think you should respect his wishes. Without waiting for a response, I hung up the phone and immediately blocked Sandra's number. The swift and decisive way I handled it left even my parents stunned. It was my grandmother who broke the silence. Eat your food, she said, voice calm but firm. Other people's lives are their karma. We have no place interfering. I nearly wanted to applaud her wisdom. After dinner, I crouched in the courtyard, rubbing the soft fur of a little puppy, when my parents approached me cautiously. Miranda, what's going on with you lately? My mom hesitated. You just seem different. My father remained silent, but the concern in his eyes was unmistakable. Their expressions made my nose sting with emotion. When I wiped my eyes, I was surprised to find actual tears there. Mom, Dad, I had a dream. I lied and told them it was a dream, recounting all the events of my past life, how, after their deaths, Diego's family used me, how I was trapped in that miserable marriage, how I gave up everything while Diego squandered his life away. My father's expression turned as dark as the bottom of a burnt pot. My parents had always trusted me, and given that everything started from Diego's trip to Beijing and Sandra begging me to find him, they understood why I had insisted on coming to Grandma's house and refused to go back. My good girl, my precious baby. My mother had always been soft-hearted. Even though she knew it was just a dream, she immediately pulled me into her arms, tears falling onto my hair, unable to stop herself from feeling heartbroken for me. My father smoked a cigarette in silence before making a decision. If our daughter had a dream like this, maybe it's a sign that Diego's family is bad luck for us. I've decided, we're moving. As soon as we go back, we'll find a new place and stay far away from them. I never expected my parents to believe in me so completely. My nose burned with emotion as I nodded, tears falling freely. At the same time, I tightened my grip on my mother, holding on to her warmth. We spent half a month in the countryside. By the time we returned, I was visibly tanner, thanks to all the time spent under the sun. Before we left, my grandmother filled our car with food, stuffing it with homegrown vegetables, fresh eggs, and dried goods. Since we still had to stay in our old house for a short while before moving, we returned home first. Just as we reached our doorstep, Sandra's door flew open. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but beneath her sorrow was a glint of barely concealed hatred. Chapter 5. Why didn't you answer my calls? Sandra's face twisted with frustration as she demanded an answer. Why didn't you come back to help me find Diego? She suddenly shouted, making my parents jump in surprise. Clearly, they hadn't expected such an emotional outburst, but I just stared at her coldly. After being her daughter-in-law for over 20 years, no one knew better than me just how good she was at playing the victim and twisting the truth. My mom, unable to hold back, was about to speak up, but I gently tugged her sleeve. Let's go inside. It's not worth it. Still holding me protectively, my mom glared at Sandra before snapping. You can't even control your own son, and now you want our Miranda to do it for you? What does Miranda have to do with you? You're asking the wrong person. Let me tell you that. Then, she pulled me inside, slamming the door behind us. Once inside, my dad immediately started calling his friends, securing an appointment to view houses that very afternoon. If things went well, we could move as early as tomorrow. My mom and I sat together on the couch. She gently stroked my hair, over and over, murmuring, "It's okay. It's okay. We'll be far away from them soon. Very, very far." I curled into her warmth and let out a small, soft MMH in response. The process of finding a new house went even faster than I expected. But what arrived even sooner was my university acceptance letter. This time, there was no Diego, no car accident. I happily went to school and picked up my acceptance letter with my own hands. When I got home, my parents were still discussing how much allowance to give me, and we laughed together, feeling pure happiness. It was the kind of happiness I had never known in my past life. Though sometimes, I still had nightmares of my previous life, of how I struggled to keep a family afloat on my meager savings, of how I endured my in-laws' resentment, my children's indifference, and Diego's endless fights, of how I barely survived those years. But this time, I was starting over, and that was all that mattered. Chapter 6. The start of the new school year arrived quickly. As I stood on campus, my parents by my side, I could see the joy on their faces. They were proud of my decision to change my college application. In my past life, at this exact moment, I had just finished arranging my parents' funeral, wandering around in a daze as I followed Diego to that second-tier suburban university. Whenever people asked what our relationship was, Diego would instinctively put some distance between us, forcing out an awkward smile before saying, "She's just my classmate," even though, at the time, we were already engaged. I shook my head, pushing away the unnecessary memories, and walked with my parents toward the registration booth. A new school, a fresh start. Once my parents reluctantly left, I quickly adapted to my new environment. Everything around me felt precious. In my previous life, I never got to continue my education because I was trapped raising children and taking care of my in-laws. But now, I finally had the chance, and no one was happier than me. During winter break, I returned home with my scholarship money and the earnings from the articles I had written. I used them to buy gifts for my parents. Their eyes crinkled into joyful smiles as they praised me for being their most precious little girl. That night, my parents teamed up in the kitchen to cook a grand feast. Over dinner, we chatted happily until my mother casually mentioned Sandra. I ran into her a couple of days ago at the market. She and her husband were selling vegetables. She sighed, shaking her head. After they both got laid off, they barely got by on government assistance, but it was enough to survive. But now, I heard Diego signed with some company in Beijing. His training fees alone cost several thousand a month, and that doesn't even cover food or housing. If he actually succeeds, that's one thing. But if he doesn't, I lowered my head and picked up some food with my chopsticks. But inside, I was laughing mockingly. Diego was never going to make it. And it wasn't even because I wished him ill. He was just too eager to show off. The moment he signed with some random company, he immediately posted about it on social media, bragging about his big break. But he was too blinded by excitement to even look at the company's name. Longyue Entertainment, the same shady company that, in my previous life, was exposed for being a scam. Their business model? They lured in desperate trainees, charged them ridiculous training fees, and then bundled them up and sold them off to shady, unlicensed entertainment agencies. Diego, once again, had no idea what he was walking into. The trainees who had gone to Longyue Entertainment suffered terribly. They spent hundreds of thousands on training, only to never set foot on a real stage or learn anything of value. In the end, they were simply sold off to another exploitative agency, falling from one pit of wolves into another. I heard that out of dozens of trainees, only one managed to escape, and that was only because his family was rich, enough to pay over 1,000,000 yuan in contract termination fees to set him free. But Diego? He never found out. By the time the scandal broke, he was already immersed in the excitement of college life, spending his days bouncing between different clubs and activities, completely forgetting about the dream he once swore to chase, even giving up school for it. The only time he ever remembered his so-called dream was when we fought, when he needed something to blame me for. My mother didn't dwell on the topic. She had a big heart, and before long, she was already talking about other funny stories with my father, laughing together in perfect harmony. I smiled along with them, listening to their happy chatter. After we moved, I thought I'd never see Diego's family again, but fate had other plans. The very next day, while on my way to meet a friend, Sandra suddenly jumped out from a shop and grabbed me. It had been a while since I last saw her. Even though she had been sickly before, she had always maintained a well-groomed appearance. But now, she looked exhausted. Her cheeks were sunken, her lips were dry and cracked, and her entire body carried the weight of illness. Since my friend hadn't arrived yet, and I was alone, Sandra's eyes lit up with joy before she clutched my arm and started rambling nonstop. Most of it was complaints. Complaints about how heartless we were for moving away. Complaints about how Diego had gone to Beijing for training and wouldn't even be home for the new year. I calmly pulled my arm back and said, Aunt Sandra, sorry, but I have something to do. I need to go. Sandra looked genuinely stunned by my indifferent attitude, but she quickly recovered, blocking my path with a disapproving frown. Miranda, why are you getting more and more disrespectful as you grow older? I didn't even hold a grudge over you ignoring my calls. And yet you're acting like this? Where are your manners? Then, as if remembering something, she relaxed her shoulders, smoothed her hair, and softened her tone. Look, Auntie understands. You've always liked Diego. And now, even though he's gone to Beijing to become a big star, that doesn't mean you can't still be together. At that moment, I saw the way her eyes flickered, and I immediately knew she was scheming something. I heard your family moved into a big house, right? But you haven't sold the old one yet, have you? She spoke in a confident, matter-of-fact tone, as if everything was already decided. How about this? Give Auntie the keys. I can help you look after the place. Clean it up now and then, and for New Year's, instead of spending it alone, why don't you come celebrate with us? Diego will feel much better knowing that someone is taking care of us. Sandra smiled as if she had just made the most reasonable suggestion in the world, but I saw right through her. If she got the keys, she would immediately rent out the house, earning easy money for doing nothing. And if I spent New Year's with them, not only would she be showing off to my parents that she still had control over me, but she'd also get a free maid and ATM machine to exploit. Did she really think I didn't see through her pathetic tricks? I let out a bright, easygoing smile and agreed immediately. That sounds great. Auntie Sandra, go home and wait for me, okay? I'll talk to my parents. You and Uncle don't need to buy anything. I'll make sure to bring everything myself. Sandra's eyes lit up in delight. She showered me with praises, calling me a sweet, considerate child, and only after reluctantly saying a few more words did she finally leave. The moment she was gone, I dusted off the spot where she had grabbed me, let out a cold chuckle, and walked away. Let's see who tricks who. Chapter 7. I had a wonderful New Year. As for Diego's parents, probably not so much. Of course, I never gave them the house keys. And as for the food I had promised, that never happened either. During the holiday season, fresh produce, rice, and flour were hard to come by, and even if they were available, the prices had skyrocketed. With Diego chasing his so-called dream, his parents were already struggling financially. They would never waste money on holiday luxuries. I didn't even bother hiding what I had done. I openly told my dad how Sandra had tried to trick me into becoming their unpaid servant. And he was furious, but not at me. Damn it! If I had known, I would have made sure you scammed them even harder. He slammed the table, cursing angrily. The nerve of them, thinking my college-bound daughter should be their damn maid. Over my dead body. I laughed so hard I got the hiccups. I hadn't expected my dad to be so completely on my side. But what I truly didn't expect was that before the new year even ended, Diego came back. And he didn't come alone. He brought a girl with him. Chapter 8. I ran into Diego and the girl on the street. They were huddled together, whispering sweet nothings, completely absorbed in each other. The moment Diego saw me, he instinctively pushed her away. The girl stumbled a step, her face instantly darkening. Diego, what the hell? You begged me to come back with you, and now you're pushing me away? Diego panicked, immediately turning to soothe her. Yet he couldn't stop sneaking glances at me. Maybe it was the habit he had built over 20 years of marriage, cheating but always staying on guard. Even though we weren't husband and wife anymore, he still couldn't shake off his paranoia. I studied him briefly, and when my gaze landed on the girl beside him, a strange sense of familiarity struck me. A moment later, it clicked, and suddenly, everything made sense. I finally understood why Diego had suddenly decided to become a singer in Beijing in my past life. I finally understood why. After once swearing his love to me, he never brought up our past again. I finally understood why Diego had hated me so much later on. A laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. Meeting Diego's gaze, filled with unease, I let my eyes turn sharp with mockery. Then, without a word, I mouthed a curse at him, turned around, and walked away without hesitation. Her name was Luna. She had been a transfer student in our class for a short time during our senior year of high school. She was young, beautiful, and full of life, completely different from us, who only cared about burying our heads in textbooks. Luna's short time in our class had been enough for her to become every boy's untouchable fantasy, and Diego had clearly been one of them. I should have known. One night, the power went out at school. By the dim glow of candlelight, Diego casually sang a song, and Luna praised him endlessly, saying his voice was good enough to make it big in Beijing. Luna was from Beijing, and for us, a bunch of kids from an obscure little county, the very name of the city felt like another world. Looking back now, everything had been right in front of me. After Luna left, Diego's attitude toward me changed. He started picking at me, criticizing how I ate, saying I wasn't graceful like Luna, mocking me for only caring about school instead of having a heart that longed to explore the world, saying I was boring, plain, and wasting my youth because I didn't know how to dress up like a proper girl. At the time, I had naively believed he was trying to help me become better. But now I knew the truth. He simply couldn't find even a single trace of Luna in me, and his frustration turned into resentment, nitpicking at me over and over again. Even when we got married, he had been cold as ice, and the moment we got our marriage certificate, he had muttered, "Are you happy now?" As if I had forced him into it, as if I had been the one who made him sleep with me, as if his own lack of self-control was somehow my fault and I had to bear the consequences. That was how Diego solved his problems, by shifting the blame onto someone else. Chapter 9. I had no idea how Diego reconnected with Luna in Beijing. All I knew was that his new year was full of drama. Apparently, Luna had stormed out of his house within half an hour of arriving. Diego, desperate to chase after his so-called white moonlight, immediately followed her back to Beijing without so much as a single word to his parents. My mother, being naturally curious, secretly asked around for details. That's when she found out. The moment Sandra laid eyes on Luna, she tried to put her in her place. But Luna was not someone to be messed with. She fired back with sharp words of her own and, in a final act of defiance, flipped their greasy dining table over before storming out. My parents, delighted by the chaos, laughed about Diego's misfortune. Then, smiling ear to ear, they sent me back to university with one final reminder. Just focus on studying and enjoying yourself. You don't need to worry about anything else. And I did. I spent my free time writing more stories, pouring my creativity into my work. Without anyone knowing, I had already finished 3 novels, each over 1,000,000 words long. The royalties kept rolling in, and I was making more money than I knew what to do with. But just as things were going well, Diego suddenly tried to add me on social media. I ignored his request. He tried again and again. After several failed attempts, he started using different numbers to contact me. Fed up, I finally gave in just to get some peace. The moment we became friends again, Diego barely exchanged a few polite greetings before launching into a full-on pity party. He whined endlessly about how hard life in Beijing was, with so many people chasing the same dream. His own talent wasn't enough to stand out. His only strengths were his silver tongue and his still passable looks, which had helped him win over Luna in the first place. But once he finally had her, the goddess he had placed on a pedestal suddenly seemed less divine. After a short period of intense romance, Diego couldn't help but return to his true nature. He started expecting Luna to take care of him. But Luna was not me. To her, dating Diego was already an act of charity. There was no way she would lower herself further to cater to his needs. And so, just as quickly as she had entered his life, she dumped him. And to make things worse, his entertainment company collapsed in a major scandal. I'm so unlucky. What kind of garbage company makes you train for 14 hours a day just for vocal lessons? If I were still in school, I'd be so much happier. Ugh. Women in Beijing are all so materialistic. I'm just not famous yet. It's not like I'll never be famous. And still, none of them even want to have a drink with me. I switched to a new company, but it's not any better. If I had known, I wouldn't have come at all. Beijing isn't as amazing as everyone says. The people here suck. They're nothing like the simple, honest folks from our small town. I had muted Diego's messages a long time ago, only checking them once in a while out of boredom. When I read that last one, I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Oh, right. The people from our small town were so simple and honest. That's why his family took full advantage of it. Why they spent an entire lifetime breaking me down, shaping me, and using me like a servant. In the end, the only fool had been me. But the truth was, no matter what choice Diego made, he was always going to regret it. Because Diego never truly put in any effort. He had never worked hard for anything in his life. He was used to having things arranged for him. But the moment things didn't go his way, he would blame everyone else. In his mind, other people had forced him onto this path. And if he had just chosen the other road, his life would have been so much better. People always liked to romanticize the choices they didn't take. And Diego was the worst offender of all. Selfish, cowardly, irresponsible, always running away. That was Diego. And that big dream he had been so obsessed with? Now that he had chased it and failed, it suddenly wasn't so great after all. With that, I blocked Diego once again. This time, I went even further. I changed all my contact information and social media accounts. A disgusting person like him belonged in the past. He could rot in his own filth for all I cared. But what I didn't expect was that after losing all contact with me, Diego would actually come all the way back from Beijing to find me. Chapter 10. By the time I was a sophomore in college, I had already earned a decent amount of money from my writing, using my memories from my past life. I took things a step further. I founded a small media company. I made my move before anyone else, signing several up-and-coming content creators who hadn't yet blown up in my previous life. One by one, I carefully planned and managed their growth. Before long, their accounts started taking off. With success came a flood of sponsorships and advertisements, and my days were soon filled to the brim with school and company work. I was so busy that I brought my parents to live with me and even bought them a house. They were thrilled beyond belief. Every day, they bragged to their friends about how successful their daughter had become. And before I knew it, they had also started obsessively watching short videos, constantly looking for new potential content creators to recommend for me to sign. One day, after finishing an exam, I was rushing out of campus to head to a company meeting, when, out of nowhere, someone grabbed me in a suffocating hug and refused to let go. "Wife, I finally found you." The familiar voice made me freeze for a split second. Then, reacting purely on instinct, I shoved the person away. That's when I finally got a good look at him. Diego. He was wearing a worn-out leather jacket, and his face bore the uneven traces of cheap makeup. When he grinned, his yellowing teeth were impossible to ignore, making my stomach churn with disgust. On top of that, he reeked of strong perfume, making my skin crawl as he tried to pull me in again. Luckily, I dodged just in time. "I know you were reborn too, wife," Diego rambled excitedly, his words coming rapid fire. "You have no idea how hard it was for me without you." With just those few sentences, I immediately pieced everything together. Sandra must have tipped him off. She probably told him I had started a media company, which led Diego to track down my artist's accounts. And, just like that, the Diego who had also been reborn quickly realized I had become a wealthy entrepreneur. Compared to struggling in Beijing, clinging on to me was clearly the smarter move. So, he came back, determined to sink his claws into me once again. Now, standing before me, he blocked my way, pretending to be full of deep, heartfelt emotion, but I wasn't falling for it. "Wife, even though we've been reborn, we can start over. Don't you remember? We had 2 adorable kids in our last life. We were a happy family of 6. I stared coldly at Diego's pathetic performance and couldn't help but roll my eyes. "Brother, wake up. Did you forget why we were reborn in the first place?" Diego's expression visibly stiffened. His eyes flickered uneasily, refusing to meet mine. "I don't want to waste time rehashing the past." I exhaled sharply, my disgust impossible to hide. "I'm just glad I finally escaped from you in this life. You always accused me of ruining your dreams and trapping you with marriage." I continued, my voice laced with mockery. You used that excuse to justify every single time you abused me. Hell, you even blamed the kids, dumping everything on them like it was their fault too. I took a step closer, tilting my head as I mocked him outright. So, tell me, Diego, now that I haven't gotten in your way this time, where's your big dream? Where's your glorious rise to fame? And why haven't you taken your precious mother to Beijing yet? I paused dramatically, then shook my head in mock realization. Oh wait, I forgot. I sneered. Your mother is still sick, working herself to the bone to pay for your dreams. Isn't she? I even heard you sold your house just to buy an electric guitar. I raised an eyebrow. Tell me, Diego, do you even know how to play that thing? Diego's face twisted into something ugly. His eyes darkened, and without warning, he grabbed my arm roughly. Miranda, who the hell do you think you are? His voice dropped dangerously low. No matter how much you pretend, I was still the one who fucked you. You spent 20 years raising my kids like a washed-up hag. Do you really think you can erase that just because we were reborn? His gaze turned vile, sweeping over me like a predator. He let out a low, cruel chuckle. You have some fame now, don't you? Imagine if I went around telling people where all your beauty marks are, which spots on your body are most sensitive. How you were a slut since childhood. Think your precious company would survive that? My eyes turned ice cold. I yanked my arm free in a swift, effortless motion. Then go ahead and say it. Diego staggered slightly, clearly not expecting my reaction. I met his nasty, scheming gaze with nothing but pure, unfiltered disgust. You got a second chance at life, and this is the best you can do? I let out a short, cold laugh. Still relying on slut-shaming women to get your way? Diego, could you, just once in your life, do something that isn't pathetic? Without hesitation, I called the campus security guards over. This man isn't a student here, I informed them sharply. Then, without waiting for Diego to react, I ducked behind the guards. After all, like Diego had said himself, we had once been married. We knew exactly how to get under each other's skin. The security guards restrained Diego immediately, and while he was still struggling, I took my chance to leave. Hailing a taxi, I left that godforsaken place without looking back. The first thing I did when I returned to my office? I called in a small-time content creator, one who hadn't made it big yet. And then, I spent the entire afternoon talking to her. Because unlike Diego, I actually knew how to build something real. Chapter 11. A short drama video suddenly went viral online. The storyline? A young girl, at the request of her neighbor's aunt, rushes to the train station late at night to find her childhood sweetheart. Her parents, worried sick, chase after her and get into a fatal car accident. And that kind neighbor? She seizes the opportunity, pretending to be a caring figure while driving away. The girl's remaining relatives and coaxing her into an engagement with her son. From there, it's a downhill spiral. The girl is forced into marriage, and bit by bit, her family's wealth is taken away. It didn't take long for this video to explode in popularity, because, of course, it was my story, the twisted tale of Diego and me, packaged into a short drama format. At the time, this type of content was still fresh, and with its mix of fact and fiction, it immediately struck a nerve with audiences. Comments flooded in. That guy is an absolute scumbag. His wife works herself to death, and all he does is eat, drink, and daydream about being a singer? Since when do singers make it big just by talking? He already got a second chance at life, and instead of fixing himself, he's harassing her again? What a joke! If I had a son like that, I'd rather strangle him. And his parents? Trash! Should have died sooner. The internet was on fire with outrage. And the small-time content creator who filmed the drama? She blew up overnight, gaining over 1 million followers in just one day. I quickly arranged sponsorships for her, setting her up with multiple advertising deals. She made a fortune, and so did I. Of course, Diego wasn't going to take this lying down. He retaliated, spreading disgusting rumors about me online, twisting our history into some sick, scandalous fantasy. And, naturally, some bottom-feeding men believed him and joined the attack. But I wasn't feeling generous. I sent out legal notices to every single one of them. After all, our lives had already diverged completely. The idea of a double rebirth was far too ridiculous for anyone to actually believe. And soon enough, Diego was arrested. It turned out his lies had spread too far. Over 30,000 shares, with some of the traffic coming from paid bot accounts he had hired himself. He had dug his own grave. Meanwhile, Sandra and her husband were desperate, running around trying to contact my family. But, of course, every attempt was in vain, and while Diego was rotting in jail, the company he had signed with in Beijing filed a lawsuit against him. Breach of contract, leaving without notice, multiple scandals, a long list of violations was piled against him. When I heard about it, even I was shocked. It seemed Diego never made it big as a singer, but he sure as hell fit right in with the industry's dirtiest habits. Some things, I suppose, never change. Diego, now completely out of options, tried reaching out to me. Through a mutual connection, he sent a request, begging me to hire a good lawyer for him. He even promised, "If you help me now, I'll repay you once I'm free." Repay me? I almost laughed out loud. He wasn't talking about repayment. He was talking about revenge. I didn't even bother replying. I simply had my staff throw his messenger out, and sent back a single-word response. Dream on. I may not go out of my way to take revenge for what happened in my past life, but that doesn't mean I'll pretend it never happened. I want to watch Diego's life spiral downward with my own eyes. I want to see my so-called good-in-laws, already old and frail, running around desperately trying to clean up after him. Only then will it feel right. I put on my sunglasses and headed to the office. The right path, the right trajectory, my life will shine brilliantly, dazzling and resplendent. Extra chapter. When Diego was arrested, his mind went blank. Faced with the police's accusations, he instinctively wanted to refute them but couldn't find the words. In the end, he gritted his teeth and could only emphasize one thing: he and Miranda were husband and wife. Yes, they were legally married. His mother had said so in his past life too, husband and wife. But since ancient times, the husband is the ruler of the household. Miranda, an orphan with no one to rely on, should be grateful that he was willing to take her in. Honestly, he used to think Miranda was nice, obedient, understanding, and so shy that she would blush just from talking to him. But everything changed when Luna appeared. That flamboyant, passionate red rose awakened every ounce of Diego's youthful desires. By comparison, Miranda was dull, lifeless. After they got married, Diego heard from an old high school classmate that Luna had gone to university in Beijing. Before she even graduated, she started dating a famous singer. The day they made their relationship public, even Weibo crashed from the overwhelming traffic. Hearing all this filled Diego with jealousy. If he had pursued his dreams back then, wouldn't he be the one standing by Luna's side now? Fueled by resentment, he started blaming Miranda for everything, for holding him back, for stopping him from chasing his dreams. He even convinced himself that if not for her, her parents wouldn't have died, and he wouldn't have been forced into an engagement with her. So, in the end, everything was Miranda's fault. If he hadn't gotten engaged and married to her, he might have still had a chance to chase his dreams. Diego deliberately tormented her for over 20 years. Every time he saw Miranda's temper grow worse, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing it was her deserved punishment. He even told their 2 children that Miranda was nothing but an angry and bad mother. Unlike him, who was always calm and kind, the children were young and impressionable. After hearing it for years, they started believing him and joined in, siding against Miranda. But Diego never expected to have another chance at life. Even more so, he never imagined that the second life would be so drastically different from what he had envisioned. He was starting to feel exhausted. He even began to miss the days when Miranda took care of him in their past life. And now that he heard Miranda had become wealthy, perfect, if they got back together, he wouldn't have to suffer the hardships of his previous life again. Diego fantasized that, with Miranda's money, he might even be able to buy his way into success. But that dream shattered completely the moment he was arrested. Even worse, his company in Beijing was also dragged into the mess. When he learned about the massive compensation he had to pay and the prison sentence awaiting him, Diego panicked. No, this wasn't how his life was supposed to be. Could he start over again? As the prison guard shaved off his brightly dyed hair, Diego stared blankly at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes finally closed, and a single tear rolled down his face. He regretted everything. So, could he have just one more chance?